In my experience, the reason most people lose a sale is because they're more concerned about being liked than they are about talking about the truth.
Before we begin today's episode, I wanted to ask you a question. If building a personal brand is such a pivotal part of our business success, why do so many of us find it so uncomfortable? The reality is, attention has become the most scarce commodity. And if you can't grab the attention of your ideal audience or customers, it's game over. So how can you get to be more known, liked, and trusted in your industry if the very idea of putting yourself out there terrifies you, or that you don't want to be spending millions of dollars in marketing each year? The answer is you need to become the spotlight in your industry. Over the years, I've had the pleasure to interview some of the most inspiring, purpose-driven, and successful individuals who've defined success on their own terms. And I've identified 5 principles that they live by. And it turns out that you can absolutely live by these principles too, to help you grow your business, your impact, and your influence. Now, if you'd like to go and take the test, it's free. It takes under 3 minutes, and you can get it at www.becomethespotlight.com. What I love about this is it's going to give you a quick snapshot overview in the 5 different areas of your life, of your business, that you need to improve right now in order to better engage and enroll your ideal customers with your message, your story, and your mission. So if you're tired of being the best kept secret and you want to do it in a way that feels congruent to who you are and how you show up in the world, take the test today. www.becomethespotlight.com. I can't wait to see what results you get.
Hi, and welcome to the Unconventionalists podcast. I'm your host, Mark Leruste, and this is a show about what it's really like to turn your message into a movement. In each episode, I sit down across an inspiring guest to ask them the ups and downs and the lessons learned from both, from living a more meaningful and purposeful life. Now, this week's episode tackles one of the biggest issues that I see both from people around me who start businesses and try and grow businesses, and that I also suffer from. Now, my friend Daniel Previously talks about, are you ABS breaking? Which is anything but sales or anything but selling. And the reason is most people want to spend time in the creative fun aspect of business, which is brand identity and creativity, logos, websites, copy, social media, content, YouTube, podcasts, all that stuff that brings awareness and is on the visit, like kind of almost like the top of the surface level. But the truth is that's not what makes a business run, right? Like when we know the statistics, the high statistics of companies who fail within the first 18 months, and I talk about this in my TEDx talk, it's shocking. And I actually believe that one of the biggest reasons that this happens is that people are reluctant to validate their ideas with their customers and to have meaningful, important sales conversations. Now, this has been a topic that's been on the back of my mind for a while. So that's why I reached out to my friend, Matt Essam, to talk about sales. He is the go-to person I often ask about sales. He comes to me about storytelling, meaning, purpose, and building your profile. And we have this kind of relationship where we've been helping each other out. It's a funny little story how we met. We go deeper into that in the podcast. But if you've been struggling with the idea of sales, if you find sales sleazy or icky, or you're uncomfortable around the idea of selling your services or products, you're going to love this conversation because we go deep into the psychology behind sales. What is probably one of the top reasons why you're not committing to serving your clients the way that you should, and 3 practical tips to how to conduct better sales conversations. It's a good and powerful conversation. So as always, if you appreciate this conversation, if you get anything out of today, please share it with one friend who needs to hear this conversation, because only by then will we have the ripple effect we need. And as always, I'd really appreciate if you take the time to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, because that's how we're going to get this conversation in front of even more people. So thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, if sales is a juicy, sensitive, emotionally charged topic, this episode is for you. And by the end of this episode, my wish is that you now embrace sales as a fully whole part of your business, and that you get excited to better show up and to serve your ideal customers. Want to find out how? Stay tuned. I give you the one and only Matt Essam. Matt, welcome to the show. Really good to have you, mate.
Thanks for having me.
So it's been a long time in the making. Thanks for your flexibility. Last time we had some childcare issues, and you try to make me feel half guilty about next time let me know because I rented a room, didn't I?
Yeah.
And I was
I didn't rent one this time.
Yeah, which I feel like is just as good, right? I mean,
since then, obviously lockdown has meant that I spent a bit of time doing up the home office to make it look a little bit more professional. Got the books in the background, so it looks like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and people missed that Matt's got a little remote control that he can change his light. It's got like this little fancy light bulb. Well, I see this in like YouTubers and stuff. What is it? It's just kind of like a back wall light that you put or something with like different color schemes or...
Yeah, it's just like a little LED thing that you can buy off Amazon.
God, you had to plug in...
Get the affiliate link going.
Isn't it? Yeah. Fine, in the description below. But look, mate, I'm really glad to get you on the show. So how about like you tell people listening, like how did you and I actually get to meet? Because it's kind of a cool story where we talk a lot about, social media being about bad for your mental health and making us more disconnected and distant from anybody else. So how do we meet?
Yeah, so someone in my network said, "Oh, you should check out this guy, Mark Leruste." So I started following you on Instagram and saw you kind of doing your daily stories. Thought clearly no one's listening to this guy, so I should probably reach out and just send him some support and let him know that I am listening. But no, in all seriousness, just kind of felt like we shared a lot of similar values and we were up to some similar stuff in the world. And just started chatting via DM, slid into the DMs.
That's it.
And yeah, the rest kind of is history, I suppose.
Yeah, because we met, and then we went in Camden. We went to like this dodgy little Greek restaurant or something. Yeah. It was like £4.50 the menu. I was like,
yeah, I remember that.
You chose it. Just let's make that one clear. And then we kind of like got to hang out, and what I really appreciated about you and kind of what we built over the years, I guess, is a bit of a support system. Kind of, you come to me for some stuff, I come to you for other stuff, and we kind of bounce back. And I think there's not enough of that, I think, in our space, especially when you kind of, go from being maybe an employer, a freelance, and starting to build your business as a solopreneur, and then starting building a small team, and it's hard, like it's lonely, right? Like we've talked a lot about this, like the ups and downs, and sometimes you'll be down in the trenches, I'll be, and then we kind of pick each other up. So that's been really cool. We appreciate that. And then you came over to my birthday weekend with Aaron and Thomas, and we had kind of really cool lads birthday weekend, which, by the way, anybody listening to this, if it's your birthday, don't be the designated driver and drive your three mates through the countryside slightly inebriated, But that was good fun. It's cool. You can play guitar, by the way. You're a good guitarist.
Thanks. It's almost in shot. I tried to maneuver it in shot a little bit.
Yeah.
Got the piano in the background, just slightly in there as well. It's kind of like a half show off. Like I don't want to show off too much. I didn't want to just have it right there. So it's like, look everyone, I'm so cool. I play musical instruments. But if you're really looking closely, you can see that there's some musical instruments in the background. And
for those who can't see Matt, he's got a kind of a digital sex toy in the background on the cover there. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it looks
gimbal.
A gimbal. It looks very cool. But look, here's the thing. So you're a business coach for creatives, and what's been amazing to watch is to kind of see just how much you've grown and your business and really committed. And one of the things I really want to get to talk to you about today is the less glamorous and sexy side of business, which I think, a lot of podcasts, a lot of videos talk about the glamorous side of, your message and pitching and whatever it is. But there's a whole other area that a lot of people avoid, which is sales and like actually getting to the real juice of the business, right? And you're one of the rare people who I know who actually genuinely enjoy it, or at least like have spent a lot of time studying it. So I guess one of the first questions I want to kick off with, have you always been comfortable with sales or enjoy the sales process? Or was there a point where you were just like, I don't want to have a sales conversation. I don't like selling myself or my services. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I did this, I ran, a couple of different businesses, but I kind of transitioned from being a marketing consultant to a business coach. But then prior to that, I was literally just doing the implementation. So I was designing and building websites for people, graphic design, photography, all of that kind of stuff. And what I realized in all of those years doing that, I was doing that for about 5 or 6 years, I never really had a proper sales conversation.
Mm.
I was just an order taker.
Mm.
Someone said, we need this. And I said, okay, cool. Tell me more about that. They explained it in more detail and I built it for them.
Yeah.
And it was only when I started hanging out
And how
with,
did you charge, by the way? Because you know, and I love where you're going with this. But how did you? So let's say someone came to you and say, "Hey, Matt, we want to build a website, or we want
yeah,
to do X, Y, Z." Like, how much would you go about figuring out how much that's worth?
I think it really varied through the years, but I went from kind of using boiler templates of, this is how you work it out, estimate how many hours it's going to take you and da 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 da, to more kind of fixed pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I'm just plugging my laptop in because I realized that I don't want it to run out of battery. So I suppose I went from that boilerplate template of hours and breaking it all down to then getting a bit more clear on what their budget was and what they wanted it for. So I did start to change how I charged, but I never really had a proper sales conversation.
Yeah. So what's the proper sales conversation?
Yeah, good question. And the reason I transitioned from not really enjoying that to enjoying it is I realized that coaching and sales is very, very interlinked. I think a good sales conversation is just like a good coaching conversation. So I believe that a sales conversation is about understanding exactly where someone is right now, where they want to be, and what they believe is standing in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then your job as a salesperson is to help them make an informed decision based on what you reveal in that conversation.
So give an example, right? Because when you started off, so you were kind of, you transitioned away from what you would do as a hired gun, as I would call us.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you started deciding, okay, I want to start building a bit more of a business, start having a bit more of a process. How did that transition go? Like, because it's a different ball, like it's a different beast, right? So you start understanding the concept of sales conversations. Like, what does that look like when you kick off?
It looks like having the guts to challenge people a bit more.
Mm.
So when someone came to me and said, we need a website, instead of just saying, okay, cool, I started to say, okay, like, why do you need it?
Mm.
Which kind of seems like a bit of a crazy question from someone who's delivering websites. Like, why question the person that's asking you to build the thing that you can build? And what I learned from a couple of people that were mentoring me at the time was that I needed to take more responsibility for my clients' outcomes.
Mm.
And obviously there's only a certain amount you can do that. And it's about showing up for your clients rather than, being responsible kind of for the actual outcome. But it was like, well, if I only got paid when I delivered the result that they wanted, what would need to happen for me to get paid? And so instead of just saying, here's a website, I was like, well, why do you want this website? What's it actually for? And most people come to you with a whole bunch of assumptions about websites. So it's almost a little bit like a patient going to a doctor and saying,
I want a vitamin or something.
yeah,
I want
like
a vitamin.
I want this particular treatment.
Yeah.
Like the doctor wouldn't do that. They would say, okay, well, why do you want that? Like what symptoms are you
on?
experiencing? What's going on? They'd run some tests and they'd figure out what the best approach was.
Mm.
So the shift for me was about outcome focused kind of selling and client interactions versus just delivery focused.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is kind of where your switch happened is when you started going, I'm not here to just sell a website design program or product, but rather I'm here to solve my clients' problems. And I want to make sure that what that problem is can be fixed by the best tools. And if a website it is great, but if it's not, then I either might want to refer or I might actually want to build something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of hit home for me. I remember once this client had spent a fair bit of money. I think at the time it was kind of upwards of 4K, but they're a very small business. And they were like, we've put all this marketing budget aside, and they basically put it all into their website. And after we had built it for them and after we had designed it, we started saying, what kind of results are you getting from it? And they said, well, we haven't really increased our traffic, or no one's really engaging or
Engaging.
reading our blogs or buying our products. And all of a sudden I realized that what they had asked for wasn't going to get them that.
Mm.
What they had got was a really nice, good looking, usable website, but they didn't really have much traffic to it in the first place.
Yeah.
So they just assumed that by redoing their website, all of a sudden they would be at the top of Google.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really spent time to question that, or, I just assumed that they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah. So it's almost like you step more into like, okay, let me be the expert of your problem and making sure we diagnose the right remedy for that. So you then go through this process, and at one point you decide to launch an accelerator. Like you start thinking, okay, well, there's a bunch of creatives, whether they're photographers, graphic designers, illustrators, agency owners. They're really good at what they do, but they seem to be constantly chasing their own tail, always chasing money, contracts. They might be getting okay money, good money, but they might even have to say yes to projects that just don't feel fulfilled by. And you as yourself, you wrote a book, and you talk about your story where you kind of realize this, that you were on the top of a mountain in Canada. And just take us back to that moment, just so people understand kind of where that penny drop moment happened.
Yeah, so it was about 2015, and I'd got my business to the point where I could run it from anywhere in the world. And it was me and another guy I was doing kind of some work with. We'd joined forces, and we had built this remote team. And I remember I'd just finished reading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this image in my head of this like ideal lifestyle that I wanted to live. And it was about traveling the world, not having anyone to answer to, running this 6-figure agency from my laptop, and just living like the ultimate lifestyle, basically. And what was really interesting was that I got to this point where I basically had kind of checked most of the boxes
Mm-hmm.
in my head that I thought equated to that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the kind of point that you're referring to was I was in Canada, and I'm sat on this mountain. I just kind of finished a morning snowboarding, and I was coming down for the last run before I had to go back, and my client started
waking up or whatever.
Yeah, or like who our developers finished and new people came on or whatever. I was like, right, I've got to get back to the hotel, and I know there's going to be some emails for me to answer. And I kind of sat as I came down for my last run, and I overlooked this incredible vista, just these rolling mountains, and it was probably a Tuesday morning, and I'm sat here thinking, look at my life right now, it's incredible, but the truth is, I'm sat here with this real deep sense of emptiness and unfulfillment. And the truth was, I was actually dreading going back to my hotel room to open up my laptop and answer emails. I just didn't want to do it. Like, I literally had to drag myself. And it was the same feeling I used to get when I had to drag myself to school in the mornings and do stuff that I really didn't want to do. And I thought something about this isn't right.
Because you'd built this, right? Like, because you'd built this. I mean, it was the company that you'd kind of co-built with this partner, but it's almost like you became the prisoner of your own making.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then what?
Well, so this wasn't just like an instant thing. I was actually traveling with a friend before that, and it was one of those things where I had it in the back of my mind, but I was just pushing it to the back. I kind of was ignoring it and just having a good time with my friend, and we were going out and we were traveling through Thailand and Singapore and all of this stuff. And in between times I was answering emails and just making sure that the business was ticking over and clients were happy. But really I was there to have a good time and travel with my friend, and the business was fueling that lifestyle. Yeah. And so it was only when I got to Canada, when I kind of had some time on my own and a bit of time to reflect, that it really kind of started creeping to the surface. And it was this pivotal moment for me. I get back to the hotel one morning and I just see a message from my mom that says, call me as soon as you can. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So I'm calling, can't get through. She rings me back, and the first thing she says is, Nigel's dead. That's all we know right now. And so Nigel was my godfather's son. And, really, I kind of looked at him as part of the family. He wasn't a blood relative, but he was close family, and I spent a fair bit of time with him. And I'm close to my godfather. And all of a sudden, I remember this kind of wave of emotion coming over me of just this sense that life is so short and, it literally could be taken away. He wasn't old. He was in his, I think, late 30s, early 40s. Life could be just taken away in that instant. And if I knew that I was going to die in 6 months' time or a year's time, there's no way I'd be doing what I'm doing right now.
It reminds me of what Steve Jobs said, like, if I wake up too many mornings thinking I don't want to be doing this, it's time for me to change.
It used to be one of my favorite quotes. It was like, I think it's something like, if I get up in the morning, I look at myself in the mirror and ask myself, if this was the last day I had, would I be doing what I am doing today? And after that event, that's what I kept coming back to. And the answer was no. And I thought, well, why is that? Because I spent so long designing and building this business and working this hard to get it to this point. So what the hell's going on?
Yeah. And because, there's a story that you also talk about around how you had to get a ticket back, but your cash flow situation wasn't great. And so you had to ask to borrow money or had to get someone to pay your ticket, and you felt shame and embarrassment around that. And I guess that was maybe part of your journey around, I don't ever want to be in this situation where I'm not only unfulfilled, but I'm not even financially able to just grab a ticket last minute to go to a funeral.
Yeah, and that was the crazy thing, because we had on our portfolio, we had quite a few decent looking clients and we had some fairly big projects, but we were just order takers. So people would pay invoices late, and the cash flow was terrible, basically. And it kind of just got to that point. I mean, it was a bit of a selfish time for Nigel to die, because I just bought a load of snowboarding gear. So, if it had mistimed it, I could have probably afford the ticket back. But that's my dark sense of humor for everybody.
Yeah, no, but but I find that interesting, because I know we've had many chats and stuff, but that, when you kind of look at your desire to then build, because this is what I find interesting, because especially I've seen behind the scenes with your business as well, like how you've kind of built it up and got the foundations and kept on grinding. Like, you weren't trying out 1,000 different things. You kind of stick to this idea. I'm going to do this accelerator, iterate it. You come and do London, you get talks, you'd go over to, Leeds. What's one thing that you've learned about your own journey with regards to your need to grow up and almost, I don't know what it is, like something about being a more mature business owner when it came down to sales?
Well, I think at the moment, I'm not 100% sure how this translates to sales, but I think the biggest distinction for me, and I'll probably credit Daniel Priestley with this, is getting out of that mindset of being a freelancer.
Right, pay per hour kind of like...
Yeah. Like he used to say to me, being self-employed is fun, but quite frankly, it's hard work. Like, where the real fun starts is when you have a business and you start building assets and you start thinking of yourself as a business. And I was like, do you know what? That really hit home for me. It's like, I don't really think of myself as a business. I think of myself as a freelancer. Yeah. And
right.
then,
like the mindset, right? So like people listening will identify this as kind of, how would you describe the difference between a freelancer's / self-employed mindset and an entrepreneur / business mindset?
Yeah, well, there's a really key distinction when it comes in terms of sales and investing. And I had this conversation with a client the other week. Thinking of yourself as the business, there's no distinction. So let's say, for example, you want to invest in a course or some Facebook ads, or you want to redo your website. You think in the context of how much you earn, and you think of it in the context of other things in your life, like, well, my mortgage is this, and this pays this, and that pays that, rather than looking at like the business as an entity and saying, what would that be? Yeah, what would that money be for the business? And actually, even until up about 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't even have a separate bank account for like my personal, my business stuff. Just real fundamental stuff like that. And you start to realize that a business is an entity. It's not you. And it's like, in relation to sales, I think the biggest mindset shift is when you start increasing your prices. And I get this resistance a lot from my clients, so designers and photographers. They start to bring am I worth that into the equation? So if they're quoting 10K for a branding project, in their mind, that's like 10K going into their pocket. And they go, oh, I don't know how I feel about someone paying me 10K.
Yeah.
But it's not. Like that 10K is going to the business.
Right. And what people don't realize, like even in my family and stuff, when they hear, how much I charge and how much I get paid to like speak or go and do some training, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I said, yeah, but what you don't realize is that a third of that's going to go to taxes. Like a third of that's going to go towards my business operational costs. And then a third of that maybe goes towards my expenses and salary and all this kind of stuff, and that's what people don't realize. Like when you quote 10K, it sounds like a 10K project, but you can put 3K straight away for the taxes. Right, you've got £7,000 left. Then you're looking at least half of that going to your overheads, and so you don't bring home that much. I find, and that was really helpful for me to understand when I started pitching clients, and because up to last year I was doing a lot more speaking, and I've had Eric Ream, and I've had Grant Baldwin on the show and stuff, and they've helped me a lot around the public speaking. And one of the things was around look at your fees and charge, and all that sense of self-worth comes into play. And why is that? Why do you think so many people listening to this will identify with the agony or the pain of having to enter a sales conversation where they feel weird, icky, whatever you want to call it?
Because everyone has an ego. Like it
Tell me
really
more.
is that simple. And it's whether you can bring your ego into the conversation or not.
What do you mean by that?
Well, all of that stuff, that fear of am I good enough? Am I worth that? I'm not sure how it all comes from the ego. And I've started to look at sales differently because most of the time, in fact, maybe all of the time, that investment isn't for me. That money that my clients are investing isn't really for me. And it sounds a bit weird, so just bear with me. But if a freelancer is earning, say, 50K, and they invest, say, 8 to 10K to come and work with me for a year, the act of taking that money and putting it into your business and saying, I'm going to put this money and this energy and this time into my business, I'm going to make this work, is bigger for them than it is for me. Like that one client isn't going to transform my business, but the act of them taking that money and putting it into their business is.
So you say take that money and put it in their business, right? So somebody says to the guy, but Matt, what are you talking about? I'm taking £10,000 out of my business and I'm giving it to you. So speak to that.
Yeah. So it's like, you've got to, in order to do that, in order to part with that much money and commit to doing something like that, you've got to shift your mindset around money. For most people.
Well, 100%. I'd say like 99%, me included. And you know this. Right?
Yeah.
We talk about this behind the scenes. So 100%.
So it's that process that's going to be the game changer. Because by you showing yourself and your ego and everything else that you can do that and you're serious about this, that's the thing that's going to change. So when you show up to your clients and say, my branding package is 10K, you're like, yeah, I've invested that into my business. Like my ego is happy with that. We're on the same page. Whereas if you've never done anything like that and you're quoting someone those kind of fees, then you bring your own money stuff to that conversation.
Yeah. And I think there might even be like a layer deeper to some of those reactions around people make up that if they say no, they're saying no to me. If they turn down my fees, that means they turn down me, right? Like there's this, I personally don't have a problem with ego. I think ego is the self-awareness of self, but you've got the triggered reactive ego, which is when you're coming from a place of protective self, if you want, where it's kind of like, no, you shouldn't, have competition. It's scary and all this stuff. And then there's the creative ego, which is kind of like, how can I come from a place of service? But I think people listening to this will probably identify with this idea of like, it's this fear. It's like this ball almost kind of, and then I'd love to get into some tactics and science, like some practical tips, right? But, I remember when I first started in the coaching world, I'd have a conversation with someone and I didn't know what fee I was going to quote, right? Like I just had like a chat, like a sample session that I used to do, whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. How does it work? And I'm like, oh, it's it's going to be like £100 an hour. Maybe like we can have a couple of sessions a month, and for like 3 months minimum commitment, and and so they'd start calculating. Oh, that's and I was just going down those conversations, and I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel confident. So it's a bit like if a doctor, you went up to a doctor and you said, and you need surgery, and he goes, well, I can use like maybe a scalpel or maybe like a pair of scissors. I'm not sure. You're like, what are you talking, doctor? That you're supposed to go and cut me open?
We'll get back to our conversation in just 1 minute. I really want to emphasize the power of the 5 principles of becoming the spotlight in your industry that I've identified over the years of dissecting and distilling the conversations I've had with some of the most inspiring and purpose-driven people who've defined success on their own terms. And I used to only make this available to my private clients in my community and my group coaching, etc. programs. But I'm now making that available to you because I really believe that if you can see where the problem is, you can improve it. So if you want to benchmark and see your ability to stand out and make an impact with your story, your message and mission, head over to www.becomethespotlight.com and fill out the quick questions. It'll take you 3 minutes. It's free, and it's going to give you a snapshot overview of where you are in your business and your ability to influence, impact those who matter most to you. It's free. It takes under 3 minutes, and it's available at www.becomethespotlight.com. Now let's get back to that conversation.
So how can people get better at sales, Matt? Shy of working with you.
Yeah. So for me, let's just because I don't want to just talk about this in the context of other people. Like I'll share how this actually happened for me.
Okay.
So the first huge investment I made, which I considered to be huge at the time, was working with Daniel Priestley. It was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Was that the Threshold program?
Yeah, the Threshold program, right?
With Dan, yeah.
And I have no idea what it is now, but at the time, I think it was about £3,500. And I remember when I saw that figure, that was just like, my mind couldn't even comprehend that. Like I'd never, ever invested that amount of money in my business. I'd never really invested any money in my business. But that was the problem. I wasn't treating it like a business.
And the fact that you weren't investing in your business meant that you struggle with understanding how other people could invest in theirs.
Absolutely, yeah. And so when I thought about that, I thought about, well, I could have a holiday for that. Like imagine what I could do, like traveling.
Sure. Like I could buy a car. I could, it could be part of the deposit towards a house. Like you start rationalizing what you could do with that money if it weren't for this particular program, course, whatever.
That was the problem.
Why was that the problem?
Well, the problem was that that's how I was thinking. So it was my thinking that was keeping me stuck.
Got it. Okay.
Because I wasn't thinking as a fundamental principle. I wasn't thinking of that as an investment for my business.
Yes. Okay. Got it. So what you're speaking to is this idea that instead of I'm not saying that all programs or all services are worth the investment. That's my personal stake. There's going to be some charlatans out there and stuff that people are trying to sell you and stuff. But if it's going to be a program that's going to genuinely level up for your business, right? Like, and the way that I see it is, so straight up, real talk, how much would you say, and you don't have to give a specific number, you can give a range or whatever metric you want, but from that £3,500 that you invested, how much did you get out of it?
So I more than doubled my income. So £50,000.
So if you went up to someone and said, if I came up to you before you had the decision, said, look, Matt, how would you like to make £50,000 more by the end of the year?
Yeah.
And you go, yeah. So all it's going to cost you, so you give me £3,500 and I'll give you £50,000. How does that sound?
Yeah, pretty good.
Right.
Obviously, it's not that simple because you have to do the work as well.
Sure. But it is that, and sometimes we miss. Like I've talked about this to you before, where I had a coach once at the very beginning of my journey. I was like, I've got to invest, and this whole thing about if I don't believe in myself, like I bought it, like that. I think there's a balance for me of like, okay, is this reasonable, but on the scale of slightly scary. but you can believe in the product, you can see results, you can speak to, like, you can touch it. But this guy, like, had a good vibe, but he was like, it was like $1,000 a session. I remember going, my limiting beliefs is why I'm not charging more in my coaching business, so I need to invest this. And so I paid like 2 sessions. And this is very much early when I was still... Anyway, after a couple of sessions, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I wasn't seeing, not only that I was not seeing the result, but I was like, this is crazy. Like $1,000. But ask me that same question now, I would tell you it depends who's coaching.
Yeah, 100%. And I think another thing, I had a similar thing where I asked someone the other day whether they did any coaching, and they sent me a thing and it was like £600 a session. The reason that puts me off is because I don't want to pay for someone's time. I don't want people to pay for my time.
Yeah.
Very intentionally, that's a figure because we work with you over a period of time, and we're concentrated on that result, that outcome that you want to get. Sure. Not like, and I would probably, and this is my maybe limiting belief or my ego stuff coming up, but I would really struggle to just quote someone, it's £1,000 an hour to have a conversation with me. Because maybe I haven't really spent the time thinking about, well, what they would get out of that or whatever.
But what if from that one conversation they would implement a couple of things, change a few things, and 10x that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the point.
I'm just curious.
It's who is gonna have that conversation and get the most value. And that's one of the things I talk to a lot of my clients about is serve the people that are going to get the biggest transformation. Don't just say yes to everything. Like, if you design this website for this company and design the exact same website for this company, who's going to get the biggest uplift in their business? Whether it's sales, whether it's engagement, whether it's email subscribers, whatever it is, like, who's going to get the most value from it? And just focus on those people.
Well, yeah. And, again, I think this is one of the common problems with people who are either starting, established still, is this idea of focusing on one kind of avatar. And we've talked about this, right? Like, that this is something that I bounce about with.
Yeah.
But how was that with you? Because you must have been challenged. And I'm guessing when you did Threshold, that was one of the big parts of the program, was like, who are you trying to call and serve? Like, who...
Yeah. And that is it's an ongoing thing, right? Always refining that. But let's just quickly go, because I feel like we left a bit of that conversation incomplete about how when someone invests in your products, it's as much for them as it is for you.
Okay.
And I don't feel like this is just limited to the coaching world. I feel like it's when you invest in your brand, when you invest in your website, when you invest in your marketing, whatever, it's like that by making that mental shift.
Wait a second. I'm going to stop you there for a second. I think something just clicked. I think what you're saying is, if you approach the conversation from, they are doing me a service by buying my product or service, then you come at it from a place of, thank you so much for the work. And, it's very much like, now it's up to me to make sure you have that transformation, as opposed to going, here's the deal. Whether we get to work together or not is irrelevant. Like, I'm not attached to work, but you got to understand that when you get into this relationship, it's just as much for you as it is for me.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
As Matthew McConaughey would say, heard.
Yeah, man.
Do you do impressions? You got a face of someone who makes impressions. Do you make impressions?
Go for it, mate.
Do you know? I don't. I'm really bad at impressions. Go on. Anyway, we're going to say.
Well, what I was going to say is just, so going back to that in the context of when I first invested in working with Daniel Priestley, there's no way that I would have showed up every single month to that venue in London to work on my business if I hadn't invested £3,000. If I had invested £300,
100%.
I would have come to a few. Once I went to the Isle of Wight festival because it was my cousin's 50th birthday. I got up at 5:30 in the morning to travel from the Isle of Wight, hungover, to come all the way to London to do the day and then go back to the Isle of Wight festival.
Yeah.
But that's because I invested that money, and it was more money than I had. It was more money than I could...
Skin in the game.
Yeah, 100%, right? Yeah. And it raised my level. So then all of a sudden, when I started thinking about £3,000, it didn't seem as much. Like, the more I got used to it and the more I saw the results and the more I started thinking, okay, this is a business. And, the things I started learning, I was like, okay, actually £3,000 is nothing. Like really, like business, the fun in business starts at 100K.
What's a scary number for you now? If you had to have like a product or a course or something and you saw the price, you'd be like, what would be that number?
Yeah, probably kind of like the 25K upwards mark.
Yeah.
Depending on how I paid for it. So I recently invested about 12K into a coaching, sales coaching academy with this guy in America, as you know. And that,
I remember that was amazing. We were laughing because it was great. It was a very good. I remember when you kind of told me about it, but it was, you know, you were kind of like, look, if I can, again, an investment, if I put in 12K in my business and out of that I can start multiplying or growing some of the revenue, then it's paid for itself.
yeah, and I would argue that it already has paid for itself, and I've only been doing it for 3 months. Because what people underestimate as well, whether it's coaching or branding or whatever, and this doesn't apply to all services, but there are a lot of services that it does apply to, is this is not like a one-time offer. So I still use things that I learned on Threshold today.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's when I asked you, like, out of £3,500 that you paid, how much have you got out of it? It wasn't just in that first year, right? You said it, but
it's hard to put a number on that.
Right, but it's definitely more than 3.5.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And people don't realize that when you're investing in a brand, even when you're taking photos for someone, I know they've probably got a bit of longevity, but it's not, you're not paying for that time that you're spending doing that thing with that person. You're like, what are you creating from this? Like, what are you going to get from this in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years time? And that's the thinking that keeps people stuck.
Well, okay, yeah. And then I think, you know, for some, again, and I think it goes to, are you speaking to the right people?
Yeah, 100%.
Because I think, like, yes to what you're saying, and if you're speaking to a young graduate who just walked out of art school and is starting off as a designer, and you're pitching him your 8 to 10K program a year, he's going to look at you and go, man, I'm in debt of like 40 grand.
Yeah.
It's your limiting beliefs that stop, you know, but, you know, so then it's like, cool, buy my book, right? Like, my book is like $9.99, whatever it is, you know, on Amazon.
And that's why we always talk about the red rope criteria. So everything I do is application only. Like, you can't just go on a website and, you know, pay £1,500 for a course, because I don't know who's taking that. I would say it'd be like almost irresponsible business. It's not, because I know a lot of people do that, and it's about, well, look, here's the information, it's what you get out of it or whatever. But for me, I would rather just work with the people that I know have the assets and the skills and the everything in order to get that exponential return.
And that, you know, and it's interesting. I was speaking to Hadrian Shatley, who's the brand strategist designer guy at the Wern. And you made an interesting point. We were talking about this, and he was kind of like trying to help me and figure out a bit more about the avatar and, you know, who's my audience, all this stuff. And we were talking about, like, you know, who do you love hanging out with most? Like, who do you love working with most? Like, who lights you up on fire? Who, like, if you thought about all your clients you've had over the years, like, what are some of the clients that really kind of, you know, met a bunch of criteria? Like, they weren't price sensitive, they showed up, they had the humility to do the work, you know, all this stuff. And I immediately saw who they were. And they were all either founders/CEOs or MDs. And the reason being isn't just because for them, my pricing isn't an issue. That is great, because it's amazing to just go in and say, hey, here's the fee of the program, here's the fee of the, you know, the package, whatever. But it's to see the ripple effect they can have. And I think that's what you're speaking to when you talk about resources. You know, what I speak to is like the impact they can have is, because my time here is and yours too is finite, and there's only so many people we can work with or impact on that level, right? And I'm not talking about to the masses if you're going to be putting out podcasts and, you know, content on social media, but like if you're going to have that deeper work of transformation with people, there's only so much we can work with. So we've got to make sure that the people we work with is worth it.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So someone listening to this, right, who's kind of going, okay, cool, I kind of understand the whole concept of investing in my business. What's a quick win that you can share? Like a few tips on how to conduct a better sales conversation. Like if they want to say, okay, Matt, I've got a call, like we're not even getting to the psychology of why people don't want to jump on phones. And I remember you like cold calling people like about a year and a half ago when you were trying to sell out one of your programs or one of your events. You're like, I'm just calling people. By the way, what did you learn from that? Like just calling people on their phones, and who were like signing up to events and numbers. What did you learn from that?
That it actually works. If you've got the right approach and you know who you're talking to, people are actually really happy. Like sometimes the hard bit was getting people off the phone. Because once you start down with the questions and they get that you understand them and their situation, they just want to, they haven't spoken to anyone else about it. So they just want to tell you more. I'm like, I'm
sales
giving you a
therapist
session right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have like a no-brainer offer, then it kind of becomes easy. Like once you understand how to create irresistible offers,
Yeah.
then actually picking up the phone to somebody is not that much of a big deal because
Yeah.
it's for them as much as it is for you. Again, like a sales conversation.
100%. And there's do you know INSEAD Business School? It's like one of the top business schools in the world. So I used to work there, and I helped them generate 8 million euros a year in sales. And usually when I say that, people are like, oh, that's not bad for like an education. It's like, well, it was so easy because the way that we structured the process is that we had marketing put out brochures and content on the website. If people wanted to download a brochure, say like management, or whatever the program was, advanced management program, AMP, they'd have to put their phone number, their email, their first name and surname, whatever. Then on my CRM system the next day, I'd have that list of people who signed up, and I'd give them a call. And some people were like in Singapore or whatever, like, right? So I'd give them a call and I'd be like, hey, I don't know, hey, Jenny, it's Mark from INSEAD. How you doing? And she'd be like, oh, hi. Like one in maybe 20 were like, why the hell are you calling me? But most of them were like, oh my God, INSEAD's calling me. And the reason I'm saying this, I was selling 55,000 euro programs, right? Like the top one was 55,000. And so some people were trying to get in, and I was trying almost like a gatekeeper. And I used to, not reverse psychology, but I used to say, look, if you're the kind of person who needs a structured program with what's going to happen from 9 to 5, this program's not for you. Right? Because like the leader of the program would tell me like, Mark, I don't want to do a timeline. It's not that kind of program, right? But the reason I'm mentioning this is the incredible offer that you named. I forgot how you called it. There's a point where you start positioning your branding and your offer becomes a no-brainer. When you get to that point, it's so cool. Like it is very exciting because it starts clicking.
Yeah, 100%.
So someone wants to have a sales conversation, and what are like 3 tips that you can give them for like some tangible, like a morsel that they can chew on to get better at sales?
I think the first one is don't be afraid to challenge people. In my experience, the reason most people lose a sale is because they're more concerned about being liked than they are about talking about the truth.
Say that again, because that needs to land.
They're more concerned about being liked than they are about telling the truth.
Mm-hmm. And I'd push it one step further. Like they're more concerned being liked than to serve.
Yeah.
Right, which is what you're saying. By speaking the truth and by seeing what's needing to be said, you're actually serving.
100%.
Yeah.
Now,
100%.
it takes a bit of practice, but that one thing alone will transform your sales game. Linked to that, second thing would be go deeper. Go deeper with people. And this works in 99% of industries. As you said before, I work predominantly with creatives. So I have people that like selling art and things as well. And what people don't do is they don't figure out the why behind what someone's actually asking for.
Mm-hmm.
So, they might come and say, oh, we really like your art. We'd love this in our living room. And they might have in their head that it's £300. So I'll give you a really tangible example of one of my clients that recently pretty much doubled what they charged for their artwork. And she does these incredible bespoke pieces where she uses cut paper or porcelain. And this couple wanted something as a present for someone's anniversary. And so they came and said, we want this, that, and the other. Now, what she would have usually done is said, okay, cool. And, what names do you want in it? What places? And gone into the logistics straight away. Mm-hmm. I said, the next time that happens, figure out what they actually want. Why do they want that? Why is
what impact do they want to have when they give that gift?
Yeah. And what will that be like for them? And how old are they? And what will that? And if they could have that, what would that mean for them in the next 3, 5, 10 years? What would it mean for their grandkids? And, you know, it sounds like you might be getting extreme when you start asking questions like that. But it's important because the person who's asking for that thing hasn't necessarily thought about that. So let's say she's charging 5K for that bit of art, right? They might go, wow, that's crazy expensive. But they're currently comparing that in their head to what they think a bit of artwork costs.
Yes.
Not to what's actually going on in their world.
Right. And I think it's also, you have a very different emotional connection to the service or product once you start digging into the deeper why. Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I'm no longer shopping just for artwork. And actually what I want to do is connect and impact and show that I care.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And therefore does a £300 off the shelf design do that? It could. But what are you really trying to, like, yeah, no, I get that. What's the third?
The third, so we've had
don't care. It's not about being liked. It's about serving.
Yeah, it's not about being like
go deeper.
Go deeper. What would be my third? I'm trying to think of something like practical that I can give people.
Okay, so I've got some typical stuff, and you can say that if you can turn that into a tip, right?
Yeah.
So some will say, let me think about it, or, you know, I don't know if it's in my budget. I don't know if I can afford it. Blah, blah, blah. Have people lost that conversation by the time they get to that? Or can you still say that?
No. Here's one thing that I've learned recently, and I'll credit my mentor, a guy named Chris Kenny, and he's just genius.
Sounds like a wrestler.
Yeah, when it comes to this sort of stuff. And there's like the base level sales stuff, and then there's like next level sales stuff. And this was a game changer for me. So he said that most people will reveal to you the thinking pattern in the first 5 to 20 minutes that is going to lead to the objection. So I'll try and rephrase this. In the first 5 to 10 minutes of a conversation, someone will reveal by something that they say the same kind of thinking pattern that's going to enforce the objection.
Okay. Give an example.
Let's take, I don't have the time.
Okay.
In their first conversation, they might be saying something like, oh, you know, we're super busy at the moment and blah, 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 blah. And so what might really be going on is they might be putting everybody else's needs before their own. As an example, you can spot that, like, as a coach, right?
Okay.
You can hear that this person, the reason that they're experiencing all of this stress and all of this stuff is because they're putting everybody else's needs before their own.
Yeah.
And most people, because they're afraid and they want to be liked and they're not going deep enough, won't call that out. They'll say, okay, cool, so you're really busy and blah, blah, blah. Well, we've got this great time management system, and this time management system is going to help you get back more time, right? And da-da-da, and this is our course, and it's 6 months long, and it does this, that, and the other. What's going to be their objection when they get to the end of the call?
I'm too busy right now.
Yeah, I'm too busy. Probably now's not the right time. I'm too busy. Whereas if you spot the thinking pattern, which is everybody else is more important than me, and you identify it and you call it out, and you say, it sounds to me like, would it be fair to say that what's going on right now is you're putting everybody else before yourself? And they go, yeah, that probably is true. And is that serving you right now? Like, is that giving you what you want?
Yeah,
no,
what's the cost of that? Yeah.
Right? So would you agree that we need to get rid of this pattern? We need to change this? Absolutely. So when then they come to the end of the call and they say, do you know what? I just don't know if I have enough time. You can go back to that and say, okay, cool. Does this relate to what we talked about earlier? Is this same pattern showing up when you're thinking about moving ahead with this program?
Yeah. And I want to make a point. This is my view on this, and you can have a different take on it. But to remove the pressure of people to feel like they are doing it for the sake of the sale, focus on you're doing it for the sake of service.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Even if they never buy from you, make them aware of that pattern. Right? Like, even if they don't, they still say, I'm busy. Cool, but I just want to point it out. Right? Like, and I think, like, if I could caveat what you're talking about, and this can be very difficult in today's day and age for some people because of circumstances and whatever, but if you enter that conversation, I need this sale or I won't X, you're going to go from a place of desperation and it comes across. I find that if you come from a place of like, look, I might not even have room or space to work with you, or you might not even be the right fit.
but we're going to spend a bit of time to get to know each other and better understand who you are, what you're about, what you're struggling with. And if at the end it feels like this could be something I could genuinely help you with, then I'll make an invitation. But through that process, it's very much like, how can I serve and transform this client no matter what?
100%. And like anytime you're making it about you rather than making it about them, you're not serving, but that's when all that ego stuff's going to come up.
Sure.
So if you make it about them, make the sale about them, that will help. I think the third thing I would say as a tip, because that kind of ties into number one, is like, don't be afraid of being serve, basically, make it about them. Go deep, and don't be afraid to go deep. Even if you're selling something that you feel, well, this is a commodity, like, oh, we sell printers, how can you go deep? Well, it's because the printer is the thing. It's like, what's behind that? What's the why behind that? Why are they buying this thing? What's it really about?
Yeah, because you might find I'm tired of, I don't want to be at risk by going to the co-working space and print from there, right? Like, I don't want to put my kids at risk. Cool. So what would that be like if you could know that you didn't have to go out to print and you would have, 100%, that makes sense.
But then the third thing I would say is have a structure. Like, know where you are in that conversation. Are you talking about what's happening now? Are you talking about where they want to be? Are you talking about what's standing in the way? Like, where are you in that conversation? So have a structure. Like, far too many people jump on a call and they just kind of ad lib it. Like, let's kind of just see if this is a good fit and tell me a bit more about this. Whereas when you have a structure, number one, it shows them that you know what you're doing. It's a little bit like, go back to the doctor example. Yeah. If you showed up and you were in operation and they're like, well, we're just going to kind of see what happens today. We'll get you in there. We'll cut you open. We'll see what it's like. Just figure out what's going on as it goes. That doesn't give you any sense of security or certainty. Whereas if you say, hey, look, by the way, thanks for jumping on this call. This is how I usually structure these calls. First, we're going to talk about this. Then we're going to talk about this. Then we're going to talk about this. And at the end, we're going to work out if we'll make a decision together, whether this is a good fit or not, whether to move forwards.
Love it, man. Yeah, that's super helpful. I'm no doubt that people listening to this are going to be like, okay, time to implement. So what's next for you? Like, what are you excited about? Because I know we're coming to the end of the interview. I've got a couple of questions for you left, but I just want to check in. What's next?
I'm excited about getting out of lockdown.
Yeah, I saw a meme. My favorite one is only 3 lockdowns left before Christmas.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm kind of excited about being able to travel again whenever that happens. But in the context of my business, I'm excited about getting more people involved in my business. I'm at that point now where I want to bring other mentors, other coaches on board and not step away from it because I don't enjoy doing it, but bring in some other experts to really get, hands-on and help people.
Well, again, what's best for your clients? And it might be that there's certain areas where that's just not your absolute zone of genius. You can do it, you're good at it, but you can bring someone who just is that extra black belt in that domain, and it just benefits everybody in the community. So I get that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm really excited about. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Like, and your paperback book?
Yeah, I have. I know you're going to grill me on that. I have actually got the draft version of it here, but that will be out without the little not for resale banner.
So people who can't see it, it's got Create and Prosper, and it's
how to find your dream clients and build a freelance business you love.
Yeah, there you go. And when is it going to be coming out? When's the paperback coming out, Matt?
End of Feb.
There you go. Because what happens if you don't get it out at Feb?
I have to pay you £10,000.
There you go. Locked down, locked in, and Matt doesn't like to part his cash with me for no reason.
But if you'd like to learn a little bit more about sales and how to grow a creative freelance business, I will give you a link for people where they can download the ebook, the PDF version.
We'll put it in the show notes. And where do you hang out online? Where can people connect with you if they listen to this and they want to reach out? Maybe got a question. Maybe want to get find out more about your products and services. Where can they go and get in touch with you?
I'm usually pretty active on Instagram. Trying to be a bit more active with my content on there. But I've been hanging out in Clubhouse quite a lot recently. So don't know how long that's going to last. But number one, Instagram for sure. And number two, you might find me on Clubhouse.
Okay, cool. Awesome, dude. Look, man, before I ask you my final question, I just want to say thanks for having reached out to me on Instagram all those moons ago.
Yeah.
Really value and appreciate our friendship. And, we've had some good chats and picked each other up and, really, really value and what you do. And it's awesome. And, that I'm getting involved in your program as well. And then I got involved. That was really cool to do a bit of work around storytelling and purpose and Really enjoy that. So yeah, looking forward to the rest, man. Looking forward to seeing your business grow and explode, and loving the screenshots of your annual accounts and just going, God damn it. Good man.
Well, it's good. It's good, man, because the good news is now I've actually got what I wanted from this relationship. We can pretty much stop talking. It's 2 years. 2 years is a long time to be in.
Yeah, that's a 3 year, mate. We've got 1 year left in the, the 3 year breakup plan.
That is true.
That's the way it works. So last question, Matt, it's coming. It's what does being unconventional mean to you?
It means doing what you really believe you were put on this earth to do. And I get that not everybody knows that or feel they know that. But I think if we get rid of all of the noise, all of the expectations that society and our family and everyone put on us, and really just listen to our intuition, I think we know. I think we know like who we want to help, what we want to do. I think most of us are just scared of what that looks like. But for me, being unconventional is not just following the path, not just doing the 9 to 5, not just conforming. It's about actually doing what you believe you're put here to do.
Amen. Appreciate it, brother. See you on the road. Thanks for coming on the show. Finally made it.
Thanks for having me.
There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Look, it was a little bit uncomfortable for me to also share and open up about some of the issues I have around sales, which is ironic because I've had 10 years of experience as a sales and I was very, very good at it. And I still am in a certain way. I've always struggled with the idea of a sales conversation, but this conversation really helped me. Like Matt generally always helps me, and we often bounce back with each other. And here's something I want to share with you. Like, if you don't have that kind of level of support, if you don't have someone in your life that you can lean into, find them. Matt reached out to me on Instagram, and look, we became, real friends outside the Instagram world, right? Like, same thing with Lucy Werner. Met her through Instagram, and so I'm grateful for those connections. So make sure that you reach out to people, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we're humans behind screens. So we all crave and deeply desire for connection. Drop down in the comments below what was like your number one takeaway from today's conversation. What is one thing that you're going to implement in your business moving forward that's going to help you to have better sales conversations? And as always, if this was powerful, if this was inspiring, if this was helpful in any kind of way, share it with one person who needs to hear this conversation. That's it, one person. And as always, make sure to subscribe, to leave a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, give it a little click, thumbs up, subscribe, all that stuff. And I appreciate you. And then my final words are always the same. Be true, be brave, be kind, and let it rip. I'll see you next time on the Unconventionalists podcast, and I can't wait.
Today's episode was brought to you by Become the Spotlight. If you're in business and you want to make a difference and make a bigger impact, you're going to have to learn how to engage and enroll your ideal audience. It turns out there are 5 principles that I've identified that every single most inspiring individual that's come on the podcast has. And you can have that too. You can figure out where you stand and how you benchmark according to these 5 principles for free. And it takes 3 minutes. And you can do that at www.becomethespotlight.com, where you're going to get an insight report and some steps that you can take to improve your score and improve your ability to stand out and make a difference with your story, your message, and your mission. Can't wait to see what score you get. Once you go through the score, let me know and tag me into social media, send me a DM. I really can't wait to see what you get. And more importantly, let's see what we can do to help you get an even higher number. I'll see you in there.